Chuck Norris couldn't or wouldn't do. The 86-year-old, long deemed invincible, has
9 days before Chuck Norris died, he posted a video of himself throwing punches in the Hawaiian sun. 86 years old, moving like a man who had made a private agreement with time that everyone else had missed. And underneath the clip, he typed 4 words: "I don't age, I level up." 9 days later, on March 19th, 2026, he was rushed from his oceanfront property on the north shore of Kauai to a hospital, and within hours he was gone. The family statement that followed asked the world for something nobody expected. Not for silence, not for prayers. The words they chose were, "Thank you for loving him." Not for watching him, not for remembering Walker, for loving him. That single distinction tells you more about who Chuck Norris actually was than any film, any fight sequence, or any meme ever managed to. What he left behind sits at approximately $70 million, confirmed by Celebrity Net Worth and referenced in coverage by both Fortune and Newsweek after his death. But that number by itself tells you almost nothing worth knowing. The real story lives in how he built it, who receives it, which network spent years quietly siphoning money he was legally owed, and which secret he buried for 26 years inside the carefully constructed image of a faithful family man. To understand any of it, you have to go back to a boy in Ryan, Oklahoma, who entered the world barely breathing and spent the first 2 decades of his life giving nobody any reason to pay attention to him. Carlos Ray Norris arrived on March 10, 1940, as what doctors called a blue baby, meaning dangerously low oxygen levels at birth made his survival in those first minutes uncertain. His mother, Wilma, raised 3 boys on faith and whatever work she could find, and his father, Ray, came back from World War II broken, turning to alcohol and disappearing for months at a time. Chuck wrote later that the house actually felt calmer when his father was gone. The family moved from Oklahoma to Kansas to California, chasing stability that never quite arrived, and Chuck graduated from North Torrance High School in 1958 as a slightly built teenager who had never competed in a sport, never led anything, and by his own honest accounting had never done anything genuinely difficult. Enlisting in the Air Force that same summer, he also married his high school sweetheart, Diane Holchek. She was 17 and he was 18, and the military sent him to South Korea. At Osan Air Base, almost by accident, he wandered into a Tang Soo Do class taught by a Korean master named Shin Jae-chul. Training 4 hours a day, 5 nights a week, he earned his black belt in 13 months, and the sentence he wrote about that moment in his memoir cuts through everything else he ever said publicly. For the first time in my life, I had accomplished something difficult on my own. Martial arts did not give Chuck Norris technique. What it gave him was the lived, physical, undeniable proof that he was capable of hard things. And once a person carries that proof in their muscles rather than just their head, they spend the rest of their life building on top of it. Discharged in 1962 and placed on a waiting list for a police officer position, Chuck started teaching karate in his parents' backyard, and that operation grew within a few years into a chain of more than 30 studios across Southern California, with students including Steve McQueen, Priscilla Presley, and Bob Barker. 6-time professional karate champion, winner of the Karate Triple Crown in 1969, and then at a tournament in New York City, Bruce Lee watched him from across a crowded floor and decided he needed to know him personally. For 2 years, they trained together in Lee's Los Angeles backyard, constantly debating fighting philosophies and making each other sharper. and that's when Lee came to Chuck with a request that would change both their careers. He needed someone to play the villain in the climactic fight at the Roman Colosseum for a film called Way of the Dragon. The Italian government had denied permission to film there, and Lee filmed anyway, illegally, across 5 days. When Chuck asked who wins the fight, Lee's answer was immediate. "I don't want to beat the world champion. I want to kill the world champion." The film cost $130,000 to produce and eventually earned an estimated $130 million worldwide, and Chuck Norris became globally recognizable for being killed on screen by a man he genuinely considered the greatest martial artist who ever lived. After Lee died in 1973, his widow moved to a house half a block from the Norris family home, and Chuck spent evenings there telling young Brandon Lee stories about his father. It was Steve McQueen who pushed Chuck toward acting directly, telling him he had the presence and simply needed the craft. His first film paid $10,000, and when no distributor would take his second film, Good Guys Wear Black, he and his producers rented the theaters themselves. The film cost $1 million to shoot and earned $18 million in return, and Hollywood stopped being able to ignore him after that. Walker, Texas Ranger premiered on CBS on April 21, 1993, and came within days of never seeing a second episode. The original production company, Cannon Television, went bankrupt during the first season. Funding collapsed after only the pilot and 2 additional episodes were completed, and the plug was essentially in someone's hand when CBS looked at the opening numbers and stopped. A 16.5 rating, a 27 share, meaning more than a quarter of every television in active use across the country that Saturday night was tuned to the show. But CBS found new partners and kept it alive. And what followed was 9 seasons, 203 episodes, and the first primetime drama in the entire history of American television produced entirely within the state of Texas. Chuck controlled creative direction through his own company Top Kick Productions, insisted on storylines consistent with his Christian faith, brought his brother Aaron on as co-producer, and recorded the theme song himself. His contract paid $375,000 per episode alongside 23% of all net profits, and across 203 episodes, his acting fees alone approached $76 million. USA Network paid $750,000 per episode for syndication rights in 1997. The show aired in more than 100 countries, and court documents filed years later revealed total Walker franchise revenue exceeding $692 million. That last number is where the story turns from success into something uglier. In 2018, Norris sued CBS and Sony Pictures Television, alleging they owed him more than $30 million in profits that had never been paid. His legal team documented how CBS had structured its streaming deals specifically to prevent his participation clause from being triggered, and had not reported a single dollar of streaming revenue to him since 2004. The litigation ran for 5 years before settling in July 2023 for an amount never disclosed publicly, and whatever CBS paid to close that case now flows into the estate his family is dividing. The $70 million estate is spread across assets that have almost nothing to do with each other on the surface. The Lone Wolf Ranch in Navasota, Texas, covers approximately 1,000 acres in Grimes County and served as the family's permanent home from around 2012 onward. The oceanfront property on Kauai, where he died, carries an estimated value of $7 million. Seaforce Bottling Company started as an accident in 2011 when workers drilling for water on the ranch struck a 23,000-year-old artesian aquifer beneath volcanic rock, and Chuck and Gina turned that discovery into a production facility capable of filling 400 bottles per minute by 2015, with distribution now covering all 48 contiguous states. Gina O'Kelly holds a controlling 51% stake as CEO, meaning the company stays entirely under her management, regardless of how the rest of the estate settles. The Total Gym infomercial partnership with Christy Brinkley ran for nearly 30 years in 85 countries and moved more than 4 million units. Royalties from more than 30 films, ongoing Walker syndication payments, book income, and decades of endorsement arrangements completed a financial structure far more diversified than his public image ever suggested. Under Texas community property law, Gina inherits half the marital estate automatically, with the remainder flowing to his 5 children. His son, Mike, became a Christian filmmaker. Eric became one of Hollywood's most respected stunt coordinators and won a NASCAR championship in 2002. The twins, Dakota and Dana Lee, born in 2001, grew up on the Texas ranch. One person absent from the inheritance is his first wife, Diane Holchek, who died in December 2025, just 3 months before Chuck, after a long struggle with dementia. In the final months of his own life, Chuck Norris lost his mother and his first wife within a short span, then followed them before spring arrived. The 5th child is the one almost nobody knew about for 26 years. In August 1962, while waiting for his Air Force discharge in Riverside, California, Chuck met a woman named Johanna at a bar and did not tell her he was married. Their brief relationship produced a daughter named Dina, born in February 1963, and when Johanna discovered the truth, she raised Dina entirely alone and said nothing to her daughter about her biological father for 16 years. When Dina was 16, her mother told her the truth and delivered one firm instruction: do not make contact. He has a family. Do not interfere. For 26 years, Dina honored that completely. The divorce between Chuck and Diane became public in 1989, and 2 years after that, Dina wrote a letter. Chuck described in his 2004 memoir, Against All Odds, walking into his living room and seeing a young woman standing there and knowing instantly, before any conversation or test, exactly who she was. He saw his own face reflected back at him, and they both wept without words. The line that followed became one of the most quoted things he ever said outside of film. There might be illegitimate parents in the world. I know because I was one, but there are no illegitimate children. Dina was welcomed without condition, as the crisis that came closest to ending everything arrived in late 2012, when Gina underwent 3 MRI scans within 8 days to evaluate rheumatoid arthritis. Each scan required an injection of a gadolinium-based contrast agent designed to clear the body within hours, and in Gina's case, it never left. Within hours of the first injection, she described her entire body burning as though acid had moved through her veins, and emergency rooms became a recurring destination across multiple consecutive nights. Symptoms escalated into full-body burning, violent tremors, kidney damage, loss of function in her left arm, and muscle decay so extreme she eventually survived on baby food. Testing for cancer, ALS, Parkinson's disease, and multiple sclerosis returned negative results across the board. Gina concluded the gadolinium had deposited permanently in her tissue, presented this to her Houston medical team, and was dismissed. She told them once, clearly, that she had been poisoned and they needed to act or she would die. Chuck located an integrative physician in Reno, arranged a private aircraft with a paramedic, and transported her across the country for chelation therapy. Testing confirmed her gadolinium levels were, in the treating doctor's own words, literally off the charts. Chuck slept beside her hospital bed on a couch for 5 continuous months, read 17 books aloud to her, and arranged stem cell treatments in China. The total cost from 2012 through 2017 reached approximately $2 million, almost entirely without insurance coverage. And in 2017, the Norrises filed a $10 million lawsuit against 11 pharmaceutical companies and testified before the FDA's advisory committee that September. The FDA subsequently voted to mandate new warning labels on gadolinium contrast agents, and the European Medicines Agency suspended 3 products outright. The lawsuit was voluntarily dismissed in January 2020 without a settlement. His Kickstart Kids Foundation launched in 1990 with support from President George H.W. Bush and eventually reached 58 Texas schools and more than 120,000 young people. Everyone who spent real time with him said it was the work he was most proud of. Not a box office number, not a stunt sequence, but a room full of teenagers learning to carry discipline inside them like something nobody could remove. The debate over his politics ignited within hours of his death and has not quieted since. He served as a longtime NRA spokesman, endorsed Mike Huckabee in a 2007 campaign advertisement that measurably shifted that primary race, then endorsed Donald Trump for 2016, and wrote a political column for WorldNet Daily for nearly 20 years. The ranch is real. The water company is real. The lawsuit settlement is real. The 5 children are real, including the daughter kept secret for 26 years and welcomed the moment she arrived to find him. The $2 million spent keeping Gina alive is real, and the man at the center of all of it entered the world barely breathing in a small Oklahoma town, taught himself discipline in a Korean martial arts class because nobody else was going to do it for him. He built an empire from a backyard karate studio, spent 5 months sleeping on a hospital couch, reading books aloud to the woman he loved, fought a major television network for $30 million they owed him, and welcomed a daughter he had never met with tears and without conditions. The legend was loud and the myth was enormous, but the man underneath it was something the memes and movies never quite had room for.